The Lost City of Atlantis, the civilization that vanished beneath the sea. The story of Atlantis begins not in the waves, but in words. Around 360 BCE, the Greek philosopher Plato sat in his academy in Athens and penned two dialogues, Timaeus and Critias. In them, he spoke of an extraordinary island civilization beyond the Pillars of Hercules, today known as the Strait of Gibraltar. He called it Atlantis, a mighty maritime power said to have existed 9,000 years before the time of Solon, the legendary Athenian lawmaker. Atlantis, Plato wrote, was a vast and advanced empire, rich in gold, silver, and orichalcum, built in concentric circles of land and water. Its architecture gleamed, its people were powerful, and its rulers noble. But as their pride grew, so did their corruption. The gods, angered by their arrogance, unleashed a disaster so violent that the entire island sank into the sea and disappeared in a single day and night of misfortune. It was a short tale, barely a few pages of text, yet it became one of the most enduring mysteries in human history. The origin of the story. From Egypt to Athens, Plato claimed that the story did not begin with him. He said it came from Solon, who traveled to Egypt around 600 BCE. There, in the temple of Neith at Say, Egyptian priests supposedly showed Solon ancient records describing a great island civilization that existed 9,000 years earlier. The Egyptians said Atlantis lay beyond the Pillars of Hercules, and that it had tried to conquer much of Europe and Africa before being destroyed by earthquakes and floods. When Solon returned to Greece, he intended to write a poem about Atlantis, but never completed it. The story was later passed down to his descendant, Critias, and then finally to Plato, who used it as a philosophical allegory. Yet the details Plato gave were astonishingly specific. The exact dimensions of the island, its engineering marvels, and the location of its capital, a circular city surrounded by rings of water and land, joined by bridges and canals. Such precision made readers wonder, was Plato recounting a myth? Or was he preserving a memory of a real civilization lost to the sea? Atlantis and the moral of power. To Plato, Atlantis was more than a story. It was a lesson about the rise and fall of civilizations. In his narrative, Athens represents the ideal society, wise, modest, and guided by virtue. Atlantis, by contrast, symbolizes wealth, greed, and the decay that comes with moral corruption. The gods, seeing the Atlanteans' arrogance, sent earthquakes and floods that swallowed their land forever. It was both a warning and a tragedy, an ancient reflection on human pride and the fragility of greatness. But even if Plato's intention was moral, many wondered, could a legend so vivid, so geographically grounded, and so consistent with flood myths from other cultures be entirely fictional? The hunt for Atlantis begins. For nearly 2,000 years, Atlantis slept in Plato's texts, half forgotten, half believed. Then, in 1882, an American politician named Ignatius Donnelly reignited the world's obsession with his groundbreaking book, Atlantis, the Antediluvian World. Donnelly argued that Atlantis was the cradle of all ancient civilizations, the mother culture that inspired Egypt, Mesopotamia, the Maya, and beyond. According to him, when Atlantis sank, its survivors scattered across the globe, carrying their knowledge of astronomy, architecture, and writing to new lands. Donnelly's ideas lacked scientific proof, but they fascinated readers. Suddenly, Atlantis fever spread through Europe and America. Explorers, scholars, and dreamers began searching the seas, convinced that Plato's words hid a literal truth. By the early 20th century, even psychics joined the hunt. The American mystic Edgar Cayce, often called the Sleeping Prophet, claimed during trance readings that Atlantis was a technologically advanced society destroyed by misuse of energy, something akin to nuclear power. He predicted that parts of Atlantis would rise again near the Bahamas, specifically around Bimini, in the 1960s. When divers discovered strange stone formations off Bimini Island in 1968, known today as the Bimini Road, believers declared Casey's prophecy fulfilled. Skeptics called it a natural formation. The debate, like Atlantis itself, refused to sink. Was Atlantis real? Three leading theories. Over the last century, historians, geologists, and archaeologists have put forth dozens of theories about the possible location of Atlantis. Among them, three stand out as most compelling. 1. The Minoan civilization and the eruption of Thera. Perhaps the most widely accepted theory among scholars links Atlantis to the Minoan civilization on the island of Crete and the nearby island of Thera, modern Santorini. The Minoans were Europe's first great maritime culture, flourishing between 2700 and 1450 BCE. Their cities were sophisticated with paved roads, plumbing, frescoes, and palaces, all hallmarks of advanced civilization. But around 1600 BCE, the massive Thera volcanic eruption devastated the region. The eruption, one of the most powerful in recorded history, created tsunamis, ash clouds, and earthquakes that crippled Minoan society. To later generations, the memory of this disaster may have transformed into Plato's tale, a great island swallowed by the sea due to divine wrath. The timeline doesn't match perfectly with Plato's 9,000 years, but many believe the number may have been exaggerated or mistranslated from Egyptian to Greek numerals. 2. The Azores or Mid-Atlantic theory. Another group of researchers places Atlantis far out in the Atlantic Ocean, near the Azores Islands, about 1,000 miles west of Portugal. In the 19th century, early oceanographers discovered undersea plateaus and ridges in that region. Some speculated these could be the remains of a sunken continent. The Azores themselves, with their volcanic peaks rising from the depths, fit Plato's image of an island larger than Libya and Asia combined, that once connected to the main Atlantic ridge. However, modern geological studies have shown that the Atlantic seafloor is composed of dense, basaltic crust, not the lighter continental rock typical of land masses. This means a continent-sized island couldn't have existed there in human times. Still, the allure of the mid-Atlantic Atlantis persists in popular imagination. 3. The submerged city off Spain, the Doñana Marshes. In 2011, a team led by archaeologist Richard Freund announced they might have found traces of Atlantis near the Doñana National Park in southern Spain, just outside the Strait of Gibraltar. Using satellite imagery and ground-penetrating radar, they discovered circular patterns beneath the marshes, resembling Plato's description of Atlantis's ringed capital. Freund proposed that a massive tsunami, perhaps around 1000 BCE, destroyed a coastal city there. Refugees from that disaster could have carried tales of the sunken land across the Mediterranean, eventually reaching Greek storytellers. While many archaeologists remain skeptical, this Iberian Atlantis theory is one of the few that aligns geographically with Plato's clues, beyond the Pillars of Hercules and near both Europe and Libya. Atlantis, in the context of global flood mythings. Plato's story is not unique. Nearly every ancient culture carries a legend of a great flood or a lost land beneath the waves. In Mesopotamia, the Epic of Gilgamesh describes gods drowning the world, sparing only a single survivor. In India, ancient texts tell of Manu, who survived a flood that destroyed humanity. The biblical Noah, the Aztec Coxcox, and even the Maya flood myths echo the same theme. Could all these stories share a common prehistoric memory, perhaps rooted in the end of the last ice age, when melting glaciers raised global sea levels by more than 120 meters between 12,000 and 6,000 BCE? If so, Plato's Atlantis could be a distant echo of real events. The submergence of coastal settlements, remembered and reshaped through millennia of storytelling. Science, myth, and the memory of the sea. In the 21st century, technology has carried the search to new depths. High-resolution sonar mapping, remote-operated submersibles, and underwater archaeology have revealed sunken cities once thought legendary, such as Dwarka off India's coast and Pavlopetri in Greece. Each discovery proves that the ocean can and does swallow entire settlements. Though none match Plato's exact Atlantis, they show that civilizations once did vanish beneath the waves. Geologists point to post-glacial sea level rise and catastrophic events like the Storegga Slide, a massive underwater landslide off Norway around 6,200 BCE that triggered giant tsunamis. Such disasters could easily erase island societies and give birth to enduring flood myths. Thus, while Plato's Atlantis may not exist as he described, the idea of a lost advanced society destroyed by water is rooted in very real geological and human history. Why the legend endures, Atlantis endures because it speaks to something timeless: the fragility of civilization. Every age projects its hopes and fears onto the legend. To Renaissance thinkers, Atlantis was a symbol of hidden wisdom. To 19th century romantics, it was proof of humanity's forgotten greatness. To the 20th century, it became a metaphor for technology run amok, a mirror for our own potential downfall. And today, in the age of climate change and rising seas, Atlantis feels eerily prophetic. Modern coastal cities, New York, Venice, Jakarta, face the same threat Plato described: the sea reclaiming the land. Atlantis, then, is not just a legend of the past, it is a warning to the present. Conclusion: between myth and memory, was Atlantis real? Perhaps not as Plato wrote it. No circular city of orichalcum, no empire spanning oceans. But beneath the layers of myth lies a deeper truth. Civilizations can rise, flourish, and vanish with terrifying speed. Plato's story, whether inspired by the Minoans, Egyptian records, or ancestral memories of post-Ice Age floods, preserves a universal truth: that human pride often precedes collapse. More than 2,300 years after Plato's pen first scratched the name Atlantis onto parchment, the lost city still refuses to drown. It lives in the currents of history, half dream, half warning, whispering from the depths. All greatness, if not guided by wisdom, will one day sink beneath the sea.